these times of great distress engendered by the COVID-19 pandemic, the federal government of Nigeria has considered it expedient to scale up a conditional cash transfer scheme to as many economically vulnerable Nigerians as possible. For a conversation around this subject and, of course, other matters arising from it, we are now being joined from Arise Abuja studio by Iorwa Apera, National Coordinator, National Social Safety Net Coordinating Office. Iorwa Apera, you are welcome to the morning show. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Well,
good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, there's been a lot of controversy around the social safety net program, particularly with regard to the conditional cash transfer that has been announced twice by President Muhammadu Buhari. Now, a group called the International Center for Investigative Reporting published some data which they claim they got from your office, the National Social Safety Net Coordinating Office, indicating very serious disparity in terms of, the distribution of cash or even other palliatives, with the Northwest, the North Central, and the Northeast having more, and the Southwest and the Southwest and the South not being paid enough attention. What is responsible for this disparity? Do you want to comment on that data that is out there? Is it truthful? Is the data actually from your office? And if so, why do we have these disparities, considering the fact that you have more cases of COVID-19 in the southern part and, fewer cases in the areas that seem to be getting more of the palliatives and the cash being distributed?
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for having me. First, the first set of data that was circulated by the institute or the organization was a bit dated. That was like 2018. Data, but even at that time, the data was not too accurate when we met with them and we discussed. But I would like to seize the opportunity to say that the cash transfer program has been in existence before now. What Mr. President said was for us to continue that cash transfer program, but also pay the existing beneficiaries 2 months in arrears of that cash transfer that was contained in his first broadcast when he announced some of those measures. So in that sense, the 2 months in advance payment becomes a palliative. We pay in 2 months cycle of 10,000 naira. So what is currently going on is that we're paying existing beneficiaries of the cash transfer program the January and February stipend that they were owed, and the March and April stipend, making it 20,000 naira. It is not, in its sense, a palliative for now, but this is what has been owed the existing beneficiaries. Mr. President's directive is for us to, as a palliative, pay 2 months in advance, which is May, June. And as soon as this 20,000 it's done with, then we're moving into paying the advance payment to this beneficiary. So they are existing beneficiaries. Now back to the subject of the numbers and the disparity thereof. Now the cash transfer mines from what we call the National Social Register. The National Social Register is a collation of state registers. These state registers are developed by the state government, and the Office of the State Operations and Coordinating Unit of the Ministry of Planning in each state of the Federation. And they do this through an engagement process with the community to build the social register. Now, the numbers in the social register are then the numbers that the cash transfer will mine for the cash transfer program. And so the pace at which the state government develop this register varies. because there's a huge process that this whole data undergo. And permit me to perhaps give a little bit of background on how we started developing the social register. The social register actually started a couple of years ago, about 6 or 7 years ago, by a World Bank assisted credit taken by the state government. At initial state, it was only 8 states it started from. And these states started building the register through a program called Youth Employment and Social Support Operations. In 2015, the federal government, under the leadership of the president, Muhammadu Buhari, then established what you now call the National Social Safety Net Coordinating Office, and also the National Cash Transfer Program. And these two programs, under the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management, and Social Development, were then saddled with the responsibility of first developing the social register, further on from what YESO was doing, but also paying the cash transfer. Now, the social register is developed through a combination of 3 targeting mechanisms. One is the geographical mapping, which identifies or determines the local governments that you start with in a state. So the state government enters a memorandum of understanding with the federal government. And part of it is that the state government will establish an office. They would recruit civil servants and deploy them fully from their primary places of assignment to man the affairs or activities of that office. Then they will also provide some minimal furnishing and office equipment. Once this is done, we then work with the team to identify the first 30% local government from Nigeria's poverty map. These first 30% local governments are the first that we start with. But for equity, we then do the first 30% poorest local government in each senatorial district of a state. So if a state has 23 local governments, we're starting with 9 local governments, for instance. And these 9 local governments are equitably distributed, 3 in each senatorial district, and is the poorest LGA. Once this is done, the state team then recruit local government staff who are then trained to engage with the community. And where that is when the second targeting mechanism called the community-based targeting takes place. Herein, the community will be sensitized, the community will be gathered at a certain date through the community leaders. All community members will be settled in the community. They will then divide this community into 3 groups. One group will be the group of the youth. The second group will be the group of women. The third group will be the group of male adults. These 3 groups will define for themselves within the context of the community what is poverty, who then within the community is considered poor and vulnerable. The youth will identify a list, the women will identify a list, and then the male will identify this. All 3 groups will be collapsed into a plenary session with all the community members where the list will be harmonized. So the youth group could pick a family of Musa, for instance, but the women will say Musa is not poor, and the male group will say Musa is not poor. They will then advance their reasons, and Musa's name will be removed. But if they say Abu's name, it's the family is poor, it comes on the list. So they now have a harmonized list that is then signed off by the community. So the community will select 2 individuals, 1 male, 1 female, who will sign off on the list. These individuals then become the grievance redress focal persons in that community. Now, the community will retain a list, this list. So every community, we have so far done the register in over 47,000 communities in 35 states of the Federation. Now, every community you go to, you see a copy of this list domiciled in the community. A second copy is taken by the local government team, who will then give it to the enumerators, who will go back and enumerate these households. Now, when this data comes to the state office for cleaning first, because it is a state register, the first check they would do is to match the community list with the data that came through the enumerators to ensure that the names that the community identified were the actual names. Once the state satisfied themselves, They put it in their server, the state social register server, where then we, the national office, we collate from there and do some further data cleaning and then put it on the national social register. Once this comes into the national social register, we'll then apply what you call the Proximate Test. And the Proximate Test then categorizes the families in the social register from the poor to the poorest. The federal government of Nigeria, for the cash transfer program, have decided that all those who lie below the 6th decile are those who are the poor, the poorest. Those are the ones that are then mined by the cash transfer program for the cash transfer. So you see a variety, variances in the figures. It is not an allocation. It is not someone sitting somewhere and writing the list. It is a process. This process I've explained does undergo quite a number of steps to ensure quality, to ensure that it's the right persons that are in the register. And then we also set up what we call an accountability system where a civil society of organization has been employed who go independently to double check on the work on the field, validate some of these names and homes, and come back with a report. And also if the processes are ongoing or not. And so it's a whole lot of process that has been over the years. And like I said, this has been over a couple of years and it's still developing. We are just about arguably 4 years in doing this work. We are now have the data in at least 47,000 communities, about 400 local governments across 35 states of the Federation. And as we speak, by the directives of Mr. President and the support and leadership of the Honorable Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, we are Hajia Sadia Umar Farouk, who have provided support in terms of passes to the community. We are still ongoing in collecting the data.
Well, I mean, the explanation you have given has been very helpful, but there are aspects of my question that you still need to clarify. One, the International Center for Investigative Reporting, in publishing the data that you referred to as data from 2018, stated very clearly that that was the data they got from your office as at April 9, 2020. So, I mean, it's not enough to just say that's 2018 data because they were very categorical and they released that data in relation to, what is being done currently. That is one. Two, I also ask you to address the issue of the disparity between the north and the southern part of Nigeria in the distribution of these palliatives. I don't think you've addressed that. Could it be that there are more poor people in the northern part of Nigeria and hence the safety net office is focusing on the north? Or could it be that the states that you said played a major part in building the the National Social Safety Register, could it be that southern states did not cooperate and now they are paying a price for not cooperating? So that clarification may well be necessary to those who have been criticizing, for the benefit of those who may have been criticizing your office.
Thank you very much, Ruben. First, there is no focus on any region in the country. We signed a memorandum of understanding with all 36 states and the FCT around 2016 that mandated the state governments to establish the offices, the state operations offices that will handle this. There are a number of states that went ahead to not only establish this office, but provided support to their state teams. Some state governments went ahead to even buy the tablets, the electronic devices to collect the data in the field. Some even went ahead to even provide further logistics to the teams to be in the local governments to collect this data. Some, because of transitions of governments and all of that, some issues were left. There are some states where the offices were not established on time. There were some states where there were some structural issues And by the terms of the agreement, there were certain standards that they were supposed to meet. Some states did faster, some states didn't. Now, secondly, the process, it's fair, transparent, and it's equal across the federation. When you talk about poverty figures, now the absolute poverty index of Nigeria puts us at about 60% of people, the total population in Nigeria below the poverty line. Now, if you take 60% and hit against individual state population, you also see that the numbers will be different. So, for instance, an Abia state with the population that it has against a Katsina state, the figures will not be the same. Same thing with a Lagos state against another state. Now, the southern states are doing very well as well. We have met with all the governors, and I'll give an example. Last week, I was in Imo State. I met the governor, the new governor of Imo State. And then we discussed, and I said, this is your work. Immediately, the governor said, look, I know I'm going to use this data is going to be very useful for me. The social register does not only give me the number of poor people. The social register also gives you information on the proximity of this poor population to social amenities like good roads, electricity, good water, schools, clinics. This will also help him to cite some of his developmental projects like clinics and electricity closer to the people. So it's a rich database that they collect and sits in the Ministry of Planning. So for him, it is something that he needs to be very, very proactive for. Immediately, he signed out 25 million to the state operations team that are going to start today to train community-based targeting officers in the local government for a 3-day training. They will then go straight into the field to begin to collect this data. So those governors, all governors are being very proactive in the support. Ogun State governor, when we met and we discussed the current governor, he now immediately supported the establishment of that team, gave them an office, established the office. Our team has trained the people in Ogun State. They are at the moment pulling the local government team together to train and go into the field. So local state governments are engaging both in the north and in the south. Katsina State Governor launched its training for the enumerators to go statewide. Kaduna State Government issued out a budget for the state team to then go statewide, move from the 30% and also expand to the remaining part of the state. So state governments are being very, very active and supportive of the move, and they are all on board with this. But it's a process. It's also work in progress. By this time, the data you see, we have 35 states, 414 local governments, 47,000 communities. In all of these communities, we have so far raised the register to 2.6 million poor and vulnerable households that Mr. President quoted, made up of 11 million individuals. This was at 29th of March when we closed the register or the books in March. As I speak to you, a number of states have sent in their data that we have cleaned, we have validated. By the end of the week or the turn of Monday, a new set of data will be released across the state that will add to those numbers. So it is work in progress. So for every community, the design and the directive of Mr. President and the federal government is that we will saturate every community in this country, every local government in every state.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Apera, and certainly it is a work in progress, but I'd like us to talk about your targeting mechanisms and see whether maybe they need to be reviewed. Now, I've been looking at some reports of people that have been on this register, on the social register for some time, and I'll take one report, for example, from a community in Akwa North local government area, and a community called Otoko Community. Now, a man there reported that of the 79 households in that community at that time, and by the way, I'm not saying this is now, this was actually last year, of the 79 households documented, only 33 were receiving the money from, receiving the cash from the register. Now, he was also accused, this man, of conniving with the government to pick vulnerable households. There is another another community where it was reported that people who had jobs were receiving money, whereas people who are unemployed were not receiving money. So it makes me look at the framework that you've described around the targeting mechanisms that you have. And I wonder whether maybe the National Social Safety Nets Coordinating Office thinks that maybe we should review these targeting mechanisms to ensure that we actually maximize the potential that we have here, because this is a great initiative. We just need to look at how to scale it up and actually ensure that we're not ignoring certain people or certain demographics, which does seem to be the case.
Okay, thank you very much. So, like I explained before, the third targeting mechanism is the Proximate Test. And the Proximate Test applies an equation made up of a number of indicators that measures the degree of wealthness of these families. So the families are all in the social register. So the proximate testing, when it applies scientifically, it then categorizes the family within the register from the poor to the poorest. Globally, those considered the poorest of the poor are those who fall between the first and the 40th percentile, the 40th percent. But for Nigeria, because of our absolute poverty figure of 60%, and because poverty in Nigeria is widespread, and because we also wanted to define it in the context of the country in terms of the spread, the federal government took a decision that everybody that falls between the first to the sixth decile, that means the federal government moved it from the fourth to the sixth decile. Now, those who fall to the 7th and the 10th decile do not qualify for cash transfer, but they qualify for other social intervention. For instance, in some states, about 15 states of the Federation who have the facility, they are mining from the social register youths, unemployed youths, and they are placing them on vocational skills training. At the end of 6 months, they are giving them starter packs to start their own businesses. Other states like Cross River and the rest are mining from the social register able-bodied people of ages 18 to 40 who are unemployed and uneducated, and giving them jobs like sweeping the streets, manning the gates at a secretariat, etc. This is called public workfare, and they pay them a stipend monthly. Jigawa state government is mining the same register to give cash stipend to pregnant women and lactating mothers to help them attend antenatal care and also help them to take immunization. So the social register is an information gateway for potential eligible beneficiaries to any social intervention program. Now, back to spreading it. As part of the palliative, the federal government is also saying those who fall above the sixth decile, they will consider in the palliative cash transfer that is being planned to then also pay them. So we still have those who have been from 7 to the 10th decile who are not on this regular cash transfer that is ongoing now, that we also have the opportunity to others. Secondly, the homegrown school feeding program, after it has considered all of its parameters around all its primary school that they were feeding before, and under the directives of the federal government of Mr. President that are going on, have come to this social register and mine from the 7th to the 10th decile all families with children of school age that are going to be supported with food rations. So the social register is a database that we used to mine for all social interventions, a good number of the social intervention. And this is completely under the leadership and the directives of Mr. President and the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs.
Well, Iorwa Apera, please, would you like to take us through what the Social Safety Nets Coordinating Office has been doing so far in practical terms? I'm not talking about data now. I'm not talking about process. I'm talking about actual implementation of the directives that you've been given by the president. Now, for example, in Oyo State, the governor of Oyo State queried your definition of the poor, and he expressed concern that in Oyo State, he doesn't understand what the social safety net is doing in terms of reaching out to the poor. Now, what the president talks about is conditional cash transfer. But we've seen videos, we've seen pictures of cash handouts. Now, what you are doing, is it really cash transfer or is it cash handout? And what is the definition of the process in terms of how you operationalize it? So these are some of the concerns that have been raised by persons. And then how do you really define the poor? I saw one definition quoting the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs as saying that if you have 5,000 naira in your account, then you do not qualify for any palliative. Do you actually have a COVID-19 register, COVID-19 palliative register, or you are just relying on the social safety register just to move to get along?
Okay, thank you very much. So first, the Honorable Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Hajia Sadia Umar Farouk, has directed very clearly two strands of work for us. One is the rapid expansion of the social register. And then two is the full digitization of the cash transfer program. Hitherto, we were paying the last mile because of the challenges of infrastructure at community levels, because the community started with at the very poorest. Some access to these communities is a huge challenge, and then there are also absence of banking infrastructure and all of that. And so the last mile is through agents. Through the agents that then hand out this cash to those beneficiaries. But with the directives, we are working very hard to do that. We have already piloted under her leadership digital payment in 6 states. Interestingly, I think Osun was one of the states, Osun or Iorwa is one of the states that was really successful in terms of digital payment. And so we are transiting into full digital payment in the next payment round. Starting from the next payment round of May, June, we will start some full digitalization that would limit or put cash handout or handing out cash to the BRS minimum. Now, for expanding the social register, we have the community that sit and define within the context, and poverty is relative. There is no one clear definition. You will read all the literatures, you will see all of those definitions. However, there is a straight consideration within the context of the community. What does the community consider as poor and vulnerable? Once the community do that, and we have had several definitions, and we're doing a research now to compiling all those definitions in the eyes of the people themselves, the eyes of the community. So a community might say when you have 10 members of a family all staying in 1 round hut or 2 round huts, it means they are poor, they cannot even afford basic housing for themselves. So they are considered poor. There are various definitions. Now, from the point of view of the statement of the Honorable Minister, part of the directive is that you will need to develop what we're calling the COVID-19 rapid response register of beneficiaries. Now, this rapid response register of beneficiaries will not only take into consideration or consider those who will be made poor or slide into the poverty as a result of the pandemic. Now, this is particularly on the urban poor, those whose life depend on daily income to the markets, menial jobs, etc. And we're considering a number of options. If you recall, Mr. President in his recent broadcast said he has given us this mandate and also stated that a technical committee is working on the modalities and he will have the report by the end of the week. And part of those considerations is what the Honorable Minister alluded to in terms of the databases that we're considering. So we're considering databases from the telecommunication companies through the NCC. We're considering the databases from the banks. We're considering databases from from the Bureau of Statistics, from NIMSI, and the recognized database, INEC, the recognized databases in the country. Now, when we have these databases collated by us, we will interact with these databases to do some form of elimination. For instance, if you have a balance of less than 5,000 naira over 3 months, you would think the person is poor, but this person has like multiple bank accounts, and in the other accounts it is heavily funded. That will be a process of elimination around those ages, and then you sieve and you have a list, and then there will also be a process. But like I said, and I mentioned, Mr. President has directed, the Honorable Minister is on top of this and is supervising us very closely, and the technical committee is at the moment working out the modalities on how this COVID-19 rapid response register of beneficiaries will be developed, and then we will swing it to action. By the timing of the Honorable Minister and her supervision, these modalities will be ready by this week for the consideration of Mr. President, and by early next week we'll be ready to start rolling out.
Thank you, Mr. Apera. Now, you mentioned that poverty is relative. Poverty is also multidimensional, but what we're trying to end here is absolute poverty by 2030 globally. Now, take Nigeria's situation where, of course, we are the poverty center, and 6 Nigerians are being pushed into poverty every single minute. Now, we can only imagine how much this figure is increasing given the current pandemic and the current outbreak. So I wonder, and I'm sure many citizens wonder, why isn't this social register published online for us to all see so that we know the poorest and most vulnerable in every single local government area and community across the country?
The aggregate figures are a monthly publication. We do our very best to put it out in the public domain every month. So the aggregate figures per community, per local government, per state, it's out there in the public domain. However, the individual information is protected by law, like you know. These are individual information, and so you won't be publishing details about an individual family in terms of names and all the other features and all the other indicators that we pick. Now, we do not only take the biodata of these families, we take other information around the kind of housing they are in, the kind of environment they live in, their proximity to schools, their proximity to social amenities. It's a whole lot of information, so it's huge. Publishing even only a state database of less than 100,000 takes volumes. So we do with aggregate figures, and it's constantly out there in the public domain. Now, talking about poverty and taking us out of poverty, there is a whole human capital development agenda that is multi-sectoral, and the government is at the moment working on it. Now, cash transfer cannot take us out of poverty alone. Cash transfer is a stimulus that then stimulates consumption. But on the long run, it has a long run, a multiple impact. It is not a cash handout, and that's one impression I also like to correct. It is not a cash handout. It is a strategic investment by government to stimulate consumption and enhance economic growth. And I'll give you an example. When a person in the community collects this 5,000 naira, evidence show that 68% of that money is going to immediate consumption, which is food. And this food he will buy in the market. Take, for instance, rice. Demand for rice in that community is going to then increase immediately because more families have the money to buy rice. That means there will be more demand on the producers to produce more rice. For instance, that means the producer that down the chain was producing only 10 bags of rice because demand was that low. Because demand has increased in these villages, he will now be producing 100 bags of rice. That means he's going to employ more people to produce more bags of rice. So in a way, this injection of cash within the communities is enhancing demand for products. These demands are also putting pressure on production and enhancing production, thereby stimulating growth in terms of employment of the reducing unemployment, as well as in terms of enhancing taxes, because these companies are going to pay income tax, so the tax will still come back to government. These traders in the villages, we have to pay local government tax. This revenue comes to the local government. The warehouses in the state capitals, we have to pay tax to the government, because the warehouses will suddenly be increasing in volume of stock. So it's a whole way of growing the economy. That is on one part. The second part is also unemployment. Like I mentioned, in some states, and in this soon all over the Federation, you will recall the Honorable Minister of Finance did announce that the federal government is investing in the public welfare and skills for job to go around the country. Now, this would pull from not only the social register and give apprenticeship opportunities to the unskilled, and give also opportunities for public works for those who are there, and then the stipend paid to them. This is an injection into the economy. Now, there is a whole lot around agriculture as well. There is the school, the whole lot around education. And there is a whole lot around health, in nutrition. So all of this investment across the spectrum of the human capital development agenda are a deliberate investment by government that will gradually move the entire people of Nigeria, the people out of poverty. The 100 million people that Mr. President mentioned, that the desire is in the next 10 years to move 100 million people out of poverty, will be achieved systematically through this deliberate investment that the government is making, starting with not only the cash transfer and the other programs that the government has invested in, like the homegrown school feeding program. When you look at the homegrown school feeding program, the cooks that have been selected around the country and in communities, these are community members who are getting this stipend. They in turn are buying homegrown products from the farms, increasing our farm produce, encouraging farmers to begin to produce, because now there is a market. There is a whole investment in Empower that graduates are being picked, and the Honorable Minister of Humanitarian Affairs has also directed that we need to then move this figure and get 400,000 more people into the Empower scheme. Now, this is also an injection. Now, those who have been existing on Empower have been paid a monthly stipend of 30,000 naira. They have used that to also build some businesses. This is our all injection into the economy. Of course, the cheap loans that are given to small, medium businesses is also growing that area of economy. So, cumulatively, the investment is going to eat those kind of results that we look at.
We have just about 4 minutes left on this conversation, but I'll still need you to clarify something for us. You were saying something about the social register and a certain law that will not make it possible for you to publish data or disclose who these persons on the social register are. Well, that, for me, will raise questions of transparency, accountability, and making it difficult if you don't publish the register for anybody to do an audit. And if we are going to talk about COVID-19 relief palliatives register of beneficiaries, then of course maybe Nigerians would like to know who benefited from those palliatives. But if you are going to say there is a certain law that says all of this cannot be published, you need to clarify that. Which law is that? That's one. And then secondly, before we round up, how much has your office given out so far in terms of cash handouts? Can you put a figure to it?
Okay, so first, you have the whole issues around data security and the laws guiding it, international best practices and all of that. I might not quote a law because that's not my field or a lawyer, but I do understand by the structure that we established and the operating systems that we have that provides that level of guidance. And also, you know that when you take personal information from someone, you are bound to protect that as much as you can. But that said, this information is in the public domain. And like I said, all the community names are public. And anyone that wants to do an audit, wants to investigate, we only need to take a trip to that community. There is a community list domiciled in that community with those names that they can pick and validate. And of course, we are also very happy for at any time to give individuals or groups or anyone access to the database based on an agreement, based on a criteria, because you need to protect it. I need to know what you want to do with this information. To that extent, you can mine, individuals, philanthropic organizations, companies can mine this data and go and do any intervention that they want. Now, that is on the part of the social register. On the part of the beneficiary register, like the cash transfer, this list is displayed publicly in every community that we are paying. So the list of beneficiaries for every community is displayed. The community see the list for those who are qualified to take the cash transfer program. For the skills for job, these are also displayed publicly. So on the side of the beneficiary registers,
we'll have to go.
They are public information, and you can access those information.
How much have you given out so far?
Total, since inception to date, the cash transfer program, has paid over 17 million US dollars or above that. About 233 million US dollars has so far been expended on the cash transfer in the last 4 years.
Thank you very much indeed.